Gargantuan worms that lurk just beneath the surface of the earth, waiting for the slightest, nearly imperceptible tremor in the loose soil above. Blind bipedal terrors that stalk the land and sky. Indeed, the versatility of the graboid and its offspring is unparalleled, with a life cycle that defies known scientific categorization in both this universe and all the others I have so far seen. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I am Dr. Felix Nebula, and I know what you're thinking. Isn't it dangerous? Do we really want to land on this Earth's soil and risk being swallowed alive just to gain biological, physiological, and behavioral knowledge about these terrifying creatures? The answer, of course, is yes. Buckle in, dear traveler, and welcome aboard the dimension-hopping bioship Manta. We'll be descending quickly. The ship's sensors have just picked up unusual seismic activity in Nevada, just outside a town known as Perfection.
Now entering this Earth's atmosphere.
Excellent.
Conducting preliminary scans.
Thank you, Manta. As we descend, allow me to provide what background information I was able to glean from historical records and what were probably supposed to be classified eyewitness reports. At first glance, the isolated settlement of Perfection appears to be a kind of oasis in the vast stretches of Nevada's Badlands, and I suppose that it is, but not in a good way. Manta has traced the first modern account to the late 19th century, when miners and settlers described bizarre tremors and sudden sinkholes appearing overnight. But it wasn't until the late 20th century that these tales gained more concrete evidence. Local ranchers reported livestock disappearing without a trace and strange disturbances in the land that defied geological explanations. These accounts, while largely brushed aside by the larger world, took on an almost mythic status within the community. Then, in the 1990s, it appears that a series of intense encounters and bizarre testimonials from certain residents transformed Perfection from an obscure town to the epicenter of a biological enigma. Word spread about the existence of subterranean behemoths, turning the small settlement into a hotspot for both scientists and thrill seekers.
None so refined as we are, I'm certain.
Of course not. Now, this wasn't the only location on this planet to have alleged encounters with these monsters, but it does appear to be where the modern accounts originated. I'm not certain whether these encounters led to a knowledge of these creatures' existence among the wider population, or if they were dismissed as some kind of hoax. In any case, I can say that we will be among the first to record the detailed biology of these so-called graboids. Classified in the genus hideous, what I will refer to as graboids are actually just one part of a three-part life cycle. The giant worms, as they are sometimes thought of, are the true graboids. The shrieker and, blaster, as I will call it, make up the other two. Now, for ordinary scientists, it would be difficult to find, much less obtain, an intact specimen. Fortunately,
I am equipped with advanced imaging technology and an OmniGrab array that can pull these creatures, unharmed, straight into an observation bay for closer study.
Precisely. Please proceed, Manta. Here we are. As you can see, a true graboid can reach lengths of 10 meters, a width of up to 2 meters, and a weight of nearly 20 tons. They are covered in a dense, leathery carapace studded with spike-like protuberances several inches long. This protective layer not only provides defense against external threats, but also aids in subterranean navigation. But clearly, one of the most distinct features of the graboid is its head. It appears to be encased within a fortified, plated sheath and houses a truly unique adaptation, a three-part jaw that apparently operates without a rigid structure. The advantage of the flexibility this provides is twofold. First, it allows for a wide gape and enhanced maneuverability through compact soil. Second, within the graboid's mouth lies one of its most intriguing features: 3 oral tentacles. These structures are muscular hydrostats, similar in function to an elephant's trunk or an octopus's arm. They possess intrinsic muscles that provide a range of motion and control that would be impossible with a rigid skeletal system. Each tentacle is tipped with bifurcated extensions, something like the mandibles of some insects, allowing for grasping of prey. These mini mouths have dental-like formations made of keratinized material, almost like their own dentition. Sensing vibrations, these tentacles shoot out to snatch prey, dragging it to the central gullet. How far outward do they reach, Manta?
I've recorded these tentacles extending up to 30 feet.
Fascinating. That's a significant reach outside its immediate vicinity, and anyone unlucky enough to be grabbed by these disturbing appendages will quickly find themselves swallowed whole. The movement of these tentacles is coordinated by a complex network of nerves controlled by a highly specialized section of the graboid brain devoted specifically to their control. On the subject of the brain, preliminary scans and behavioral analyses suggest that these creatures possess a surprising neurological complexity. Their ability to engage in what appears to be coordinated hunting strategies implies a level of social intelligence that we don't often associate with subterranean life forms. More specifically, scans have also revealed a cranial cavity in the foremost section of the graboid's anatomy. The neural tissue density here is quite impressive and indicative of advanced processing capabilities. Indeed, given the creature's habitat, it is clear that their brain is specially suited for spatial and environmental awareness within a three-dimensional matrix. In relation to the brain, locomotion itself is fascinating. The graboid moves with a concert of muscular and neurochemical coordination that requires rapid neural feedback. The cerebellum equivalent must be highly specialized, processing information from its multitude of mechanoreceptors. However, the brain seems to lack any optic processing regions. This, of course, aligns with the creature's anatomy, where eyesight is non-existent. Instead, there's an expanded lobe we theorize is devoted to processing vibrations and sound waves. We also see, just beneath their carapace, clusters of specialized subdermal vibrational receptors known as sensory papillae. These highly sensitive mechanoreceptors appear to be finely tuned to detect even the faintest of ground vibrations. Even better, they are linked to intricate amplification chambers filled with a unique viscous fluid, each serving to magnify the detected vibrations and enabling the graboid to discern not only the intensity, but also the direction of any seismic disturbances. This, in turn, triggers an innate predatory reflex arc, allowing the graboid to react almost instantaneously. This lends directly to their ambush method of hunting, wherein they propel themselves through loose soil with speeds that surpass even the quickest human sprinter.
I've even discovered first-hand accounts from Perfection Valley, where individuals chose to face harsh elements atop rock islands or utility poles, rather than the certainty of being devoured from below.
Truly tragic, and this showcases precisely how deadly these creatures are. Worse, they are intensely patient. Now, we have yet to determine the precise lifespan of the graboid, but it appears that they reproduce asexually, and once they reach maturity, they will inevitably give birth. A singularly fascinating and vomit-inducing event. It isn't clear exactly what triggers a graboid to reproduce. It may be some internal metabolic cue, or simply a factor of aging. In any case, at some point, a mature graboid will simply explode, bringing forth between 3 to 6 bipedal horrors. We'll need to study these offspring in detail as well.
And I've already located a specimen and brought it on board.
Fantastic. As is likely clear from their method of birth, shriekers, as they are known, are not a metamorphosed form of the graboid. They gestate within, eventually bursting out and killing their parent. They do bear some morphological similarities, of course, most notably in the head and mouth structures, though the tentacles of the mouth cavity appear to have fused into one. They are much smaller than their parent, at roughly 2 meters long and 3 feet tall, but what they lack in size they more than make up for in agility and speed. This is perhaps the most fascinating aspect of these creatures' life cycle. Limbless subterranean organisms giving direct birth to bipedal terrestrial offspring. And indeed, the graboid's genetic blueprint exhibits a kind of dual coding, a primary code for its own limbless form, and a secondary for the formation of the bipedal shriekers. This may sound unusual, and that's probably because it is. Still, this dual coding is reminiscent of polyphenism, a well-documented phenomenon wherein certain environmental cues can cause a single genotype to produce multiple phenotypes. You may have seen this in some social insects such as honeybees, who may become workers or queens depending on the food they receive while in the larval stage. Back within the graboid, as the shrieker embryo matures, podogenic nodes within this sac rapidly proliferate, and, influenced by specific morphogens, elongate and bifurcate to form the shrieker's limbs. Parallel to this limb evolution, there must also be an intricate rewiring of neural networks and muscular systems in order to prep the shrieker for immediate terrestrial activity post-emergence. In any case, once the offspring have erupted, we see a streamlined organism with 2 robust legs, each with 3 articulated joints, and culminating in 3 clawed feet. But beyond their limbs, sensory adaptation in shriekers is particularly intriguing. With a primary thermal apparatus atop their carapace, they are fine-tuned to detect heat, especially in the range of 97 to 107 degrees. And this becomes their primary hunting mechanism. Like their parents, they lack any true visual organs. Producing sound, however, is not an issue. Indeed, they're called shriekers for a reason. But the high-pitched noise they emit is, of course, not used for communication due to a complete lack of auditory organs. Instead, this iconic shriek is actually an auditory byproduct of the emission of heat from their mouths, thermal radiation that serves as a beacon for other shriekers, alerting them to potential food sources. Now, once they reach maturity, their primary role pivots to a singular purpose: procreation. Clearly, shriekers also reproduce asexually, and the growth of additional shriekers is set into motion within a unique organ that seems to blend the functionalities of a stomach and a uterus. Offspring attach to this organ's lining, ensuring nourishment as they develop. Of course, the simultaneous operation of digestion and gestation in a singular organ requires a highly specialized and compartmentalized structure to prevent digestive enzymes from harming the developing offspring. Indeed, the shrieker's organ does exhibit such compartmentalization, with one area dedicated to the breakdown and absorption of nutrients and another sterile section where the development of shriekers occurs. This organ likely contains cells that can switch from a digestive function to a reproductive one upon reaching a specific nutritional threshold. When this occurs, a shrieker initiates a process both fascinating and disturbing. It expands its mouth to an extreme width and proceeds to deposit a near-mature fetus onto the ground. Moments after, this offspring exhibits rapid growth and progressive maturation. Now, in mammals, including humans, there are of course instances in which twins develop in the womb. But in some cases, one twin is essentially absorbed by its sibling, often surviving as a mere clump of tissue, rarely even possessing rudimentary structures like bones or teeth. For shriekers, it seems that a similar yet distinct phenomenon occurs. The shrieker that erupted from a graboid is effectively the dominant offspring and houses its sibling inside itself. As this parent shrieker continues its intake of food, the lesser developed siblings gestate, grow, and eventually differentiate from their dominant counterpart. Observations indicate that a single shrieker harbors multiple such developing fetuses within its specialized organ. This is partly why they're so dangerous. One can quickly become a dozen, and you get the idea. But as many unfortunate residents of this universe have discovered, the life cycle of these vicious creatures doesn't end with the shrieker. Yes, it's true. Somehow, they become even more interesting. When a shrieker undergoes a particular biological, hormonal, or environmental trigger, a riveting metamorphic event ensues. Over the span of approximately 12 hours, the shrieker begins to molt, something like a snake or a cicada shedding its skin. The outcome of this transformation yields a creature colloquially known as a blaster.
Actually, I believe they're referred to as...
Close enough. This new phase of the graboid life cycle retains the iconic carapace and tripartite jaw seen in its predecessors, but in the blaster, these attributes appear more gracile than either of them. The reason for this streamlined appearance is immediately clear. While the previous phase grew legs, this one has wings.
Have you determined a trigger for this change, Doctor?
Excellent question. At the risk of boring our valued traveler, allow me a brief digression. As you can see, the transformation from a shrieker to a blaster involves significant morphological changes, a point to which we'll return momentarily. The same is true of graboids giving rise to shriekers, and needless to say, these changes demand a substantial amount of energy. It's likely that only upon consuming a critical amount of food and storing sufficient energy can a shrieker undergo these energy-intensive transformations.
Observations do seem to support this. There have been documented instances where an increase in shrieker feeding activity precedes the transformation into a blaster.
Exactly. Now, as we've seen, The ability to fly is a blaster's most distinguishing trait, though perhaps fly isn't quite the right word. Its wings, one on each flank and including a tail fan, appear to be adapted from the dermal protrusions of the first phase, though greatly elongated and with membranous interconnections reminiscent of the modified ribs of the Draco lizard. But while the musculature surrounding and supporting these wings is not enough to generate independent lift, in gliding they are surprisingly agile.
Why don't you share what propels them into the sky in the first place, Doctor?
Yes, I was just getting to that. This, our dear traveler, is perhaps the most awe-inspiring thing of all. Blasters possess a biological rocket mechanism that launches them skyward at will, somewhat similar to the discharge from a bombardier beetle, though it is far more impressive. Scans indicate that blasters possess a network of specialized organs dedicated to the synthesis, storage, and controlled release of a propellant. The binary chemical components, one appearing to be a hypergolic fluid rich in methane-based compounds, and the other an oxidizing agent, are segregated within two distinct glandular bladders. These chemicals remain inert when isolated, thereby preventing premature detonation within the blaster's body. Notably, blaster anatomy appears to exhibit a single rear opening, similar to a cloaca in birds and reptiles. Upon the initiation of flight, a precisely measured quantity of the aforementioned chemicals is pumped from their respective storage bladders into a kind of mixing chamber located just above this cloaca, initiating a violent exothermic reaction, strategically released by the cloacal sphincter. This controlled detonation generates a tremendous force, launching the creature high into the air. All of this occurs within a near instant, and still the timing between the release of the chemicals and the opening of the sphincter is absolutely crucial. If the fluid ignites too early, the creature risks self-destruction, and if the sphincter opens too late, the opportunity for effective thrust is lost. Of course, in order to deal with the repeated stress of this explosive process, the cloaca and its associated structures are incredibly resilient, reinforced with complex segments of calcium, able to absorb shock and evenly distribute impact forces throughout the body. This sophisticated internal machinery allows the blaster not only to survive its own biology, but to thrive. As many humans have already discovered, this makes it one of the most formidable predators on Earth. Eventually, as another nutritional threshold is reached, a blaster will restart the graboid life cycle anew, though in a much more mundane manner. Blasters appear to be the only phase capable of laying eggs, which will hatch directly into a brand new graboid. But now, dear traveler, let us take a figurative step back, and also a literal one. We've documented much of the individual phases of the graboid life cycle, but there are much bigger questions that we must address. For example, what exactly is a graboid?
Some scientists in this dimension have suggested classification under subphylum Annelida. However, this genus, hideous, is almost certainly unrelated to worms for several reasons: segmented jaws and mouth tentacles, but also the presence of an internal, semi-rigid support system.
Excellent point. In fact, this latter point deserves its own consideration. You see, members of hideous don't possess a true endoskeleton, and they are not vertebrates. Yet without some internal support, they would likely collapse under their own weight. To understand their unique framework, we need look no further than a variant of this species that has, to date, only been observed in Africa. It would require much more time than we currently have to fully explore this potential subspecies and the ways it differs from the individuals observed in Nevada. Suffice it to say that the African variant of hideous provides compelling evidence of a more advanced internal structure within the genus. Additionally, the presence of a clearly defined internal skeleton marks a fairly significant divergence from the American counterpart, which anchors its robust musculature not to a skeletal system at all per se, but to a central, semi-flexible ridge of calcium carbonate, not unlike that of a cuttlefish.
Perhaps this cuttlebone could shed some light on their family tree.
That is very possible, but it is interesting that the African graboid's skeleton-like structure more closely parallels the development of vertebrates, optimizing their body plan to accommodate a more agile and aggressive hunting strategy, perhaps a necessary adaptation to the more challenging prey found in the African environment. Does this mean that the African variety could be descended from those found in North America, or is it a case of split lineage? It could take years to find out, and we simply do not have that kind of time. What I can tell you is that all members of this genus exhibit a defined and familiar cardiopulmonary system. They respirate the same nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere through their lungs and exhibit a closed circulatory system pumped by a relatively traditional heart.
Everything we've seen so far seems to rule out not only vertebrate and annelid classification, but arthropods as well.
Indeed, it's very possible that the genus Hideous is entirely unrelated to any other major lineage on this planet. More study will be needed to determine this conclusively. Now, however, we turn to a major biological obstacle these creatures must overcome. As a sheer result of their size and locomotive abilities, graboids require an immense amount of energy. Paired with what we've seen of the shrieker's reproductive rate and the blaster's propulsion mechanism, the need for a hyper-efficient metabolism is clear. Even so, for these creatures, bouts of extreme activity such as hunting must be broken up by long periods of torpidity, a kind of dormancy that allows them to digest and recover equilibrium. This also helps to explain why sightings, though notable when they occur, are relatively infrequent.
I must ask, if they require such a high amount of food intake, why are they found in such sparsely populated areas? How do they survive?
Well, I propose that they are not. Indeed, it seems likely that the worldwide graboid population is dwindling rapidly. Local documentaries indicate a somewhat overzealous pursuit of potential food, even after having recently fed. This alone could hint at a deep-rooted starvation threat, that every feeding opportunity must be seized, as the interval until the next meal could be dangerously prolonged. If this hypothesis is true, and graboids are truly struggling to find adequate sustenance in their native environments, it could more fully explain their sparse sightings and potentially nomadic lifestyle, drifting from one location to another in an ever-escalating search for food.
It would seem that our visit to this dimension was well timed.
Indeed. In terms of this Earth's history, the time to observe these fascinating creatures in their natural habitat may be drawing to a close. What fortune to be able to study them so closely! Alas, dear traveler, because of this, we must now take great care to return these abducted specimens to their native soils. Don't worry, we'll make sure there are no humans in the vicinity, at least for now. Manta, chart a course for the subject of our next study. Until then, our dear traveler, feel free to take a brief rest. When you're ready, tap here to begin our next adventure.
Brace yourselves. Beginning ascent in 3, 2, 1.